Today's session is titled Implementing StageGate in the Real World, an Evolutionary Process. Our presenter is Mark Cooper, Research and Development Manager at UK-based Scott Bader, an international chemical company. Scott Bader is a leading producer of composite and specialty polymer resin. Founded in 1920, it has a rich history as a product innovator. The company created the first polyester resin that would cure at room temperature, the first air-drying polyester, and the first polyester resin for marine applications. Scott Bader is a past winner of the Queen's Award, the highest honor a UK company can receive for technological innovation. Mark Cooper has held management positions both within research and development and business development at Scott Bader. He has played a key role in the company's enhancement of its innovation systems. Mark, we're delighted to have you with us today. I'll now turn the session over to you.
Okay, thanks, Brian, and good afternoon or good morning to all the people listening in. What I try to do in this presentation is give a journey that we've been on in the last 3 or 4 years on how we have implemented a StageGate process and try and share with you some of our experiences of implementing it and how the process has evolved over that time. So, just a brief background on Barda and the company. As Brian said, we were formed in 1921 or 1920. We were originally formed in London, and then we moved to Wollaston in 1940. Wollaston is a small village in the UK. It's about 100 kilometres or 60 miles north of London, and this is where our main headquarters is based and also our biggest factory in the group. You can see, certainly in the 40s, we were very innovative and successfully produced the first room temperature polyester resin. And then in 1951, something quite unique happened, and the owner, Ernest Barda, who was a Quaker by belief, decided that one family or one person shouldn't take the benefit from all employees, and so he gave the shares away and they were put into a trust, and hence Scott Barda became a common ownership company, and that is the way we stay today. During the following years, we've acquired and grown into a multinational company, expanding into many different countries in the world. Current turnover from last year is about £175 million, and our current employees around the world is now at around 560 people. Just coming back a little bit to our structure. As I said, the owner gave the shares away, so we are a totally independent company with no external shareholders. We're a common ownership company. It enables us to think very long-term as a business, and hence with our customers and our partners, we can build long-lasting business relationships to foster loyalty and trust. Also allows us to put innovation at the heart of what we do, because we are thinking much longer term. Our people are obviously key, as they are in many organizations, but through our structure, our employees are actively encouraged to participate in the way the business is run and can have quite a say in the way the business is run. And also, as part of the beliefs of the owner, socially we continue to help those less fortunate ourselves, so quite a percentage of the profits is put back into charities and also to help people who are less fortunate. We started life as a UK company, and as you saw on the previous slide, we have expanded into an international company. So the slide you see at the minute now shows where we are. We have 5 main manufacturing sites. Here in the UK is our main headquarters and manufacturing site, and we have further sites in France, Croatia, Dubai and South Africa, and then sales or distribution operations in the other countries that you see. Where we don't act ourselves, we have agents and licensees around the world who license our technology and make products according to our own formulations. Our business can really be split into two main units. The first is what we call our composites business. This is based on a range of products using our unsaturated polyester, vinyl ester, and urethane acrylate technologies. Makes a range of products going into the composite sector. Typical markets are marine, wind energy, pipes, glass-reinforced pipes, casting applications, glass-reinforced plastic parts for land transport, for trucks, for buses, building and construction and chemicals. So quite a wide range of sector, basically, where glass-reinforced plastic's being used. And then the second unit is our specialty polymers, which is on our water-based intermediate emulsion polymer technology, and also our alkyd resins. And again, they go into a wide range of sectors. Binders and thickeners for the textile and furnishing industry, coatings, adhesives for building, adhesives, inks for graphic arts, and then also binders for our coatings market. So we have quite a wide range of chemistry and technology platforms we use to support these two businesses. The approximate split in turnover terms is about 3-to-1 in favour of composites. So composites is about 75% of the global turnover, and specialty polymers is about 25%. So that's a little bit about the company, and obviously you can visit our website to find out a little bit more. Who am I? I'm, as I say, Mark Cooper. I graduated from Cambridge University as a chemistry graduate back in 1992. I started at Barda that same year as a graduate trainee. I then moved into the R&D team at that time, and I held various R&D roles both in development and technical service teams during the next 5 to 6 years. In the meantime, I completed an MBA with the Open University, and then once that had been completed, I was fortunate enough to move into a business development role where I gained a lot more experience of the market, the customers, and really sort of the other side of the R&D profile in terms of what the commercial teams need to find out in order to feed a product definition, etc. Moved back into the R&D team as a senior manager in 2005, and it was June 7 through to 2010 that I was heavily involved in implementing StageGate into the R&D department here. And then last year I was promoted to Group R&D Manager, and I've held that position for the last few months. So that's who I am. I think where I'd like to start is what is R&D at Barda, just so I can give you a flavour of what we do here in the activities we do. We have a global team of about 55 people, which is about 10% of the workforce. About 40 of those are based at our Wollaston headquarters here. Here in the UK, and then we have teams at our group companies who are doing local developments and local tech service. R&D to us is all technical activities. It's not just research. It can cover short, mid and long-term developments. It can cover technical service to our customers. It covers support to our plants and our operations department. It covers supporting purchasing with raw materials, and that's an area that's continually increasing at the minute in light of legislative changes around the world. And also technology development, innovation, the more research side of R&D. So R&D to us is all technical activities, and that's what the team covers within different departments. So just now I'd like to take one of the opportunities to just see what the audience is doing in terms of StageGate, and the question we'd like to ask is how many organisations of the people that are listening are currently using a StageGate process to manage their new product development. So we're interested in your views and your answers there, and I think the results will be made available to you at a later date. Okay. Moving on, I really want to start the story of the journey that we have taken. What was it like before we implemented StageGate? Certainly up to 2007, we managed our R&D projects through basically a job logging system, which was supported by a homegrown Lotus Notes database that had been developed internally. It had some advantages. It allowed us to log the jobs and at least understand the lists and jobs that were going on. But it was quite a complex system. It was quite inflexible. It was quite difficult to get information out of the system to be able to make decisions, to certainly be able to make decisions about a portfolio of projects. It was quite easy to look at one individual project, but to look at a whole range, then it became quite difficult. So it's quite difficult for department managers to look at all the projects within their team. And so that lack of data that had to be almost a snapshot rather than real time probably didn't help decision making at the time on where resources were going to be used. Some of the bubbles that you see there, it actually came from a brainstorm, an internal brainstorm. I'm sure many of them are very familiar to a lot of the listeners, and is some of the reasons why we decided in 2007 we really needed to look at a different way of doing things. One or two I just want to mention is certainly around our scale-up procedure and trying to improve the procedure from taking products from the lab into the plants, and also range and product range, and making sure that the marketing and product management teams that we have here really had control of what was being done in R&D, so they could control the product range. But there's many others there that we saw as problems, we saw as things and opportunities for improvement, and that's what really led to the decision we needed to change something. So in 2007, we started to look, and Dr. Roy Phillips, who was the then R&D director, started to look at ways at how we could increase R&D productivity. The main targets were looking to increase margins, reducing time to market. How could we use our resources more efficiently? You can see, compared to a lot of companies, we have quite a small R&D team, if you think that we only have about 55 people, and that includes all technical service. So actual development teams is probably only about 20 to 25 people, so we need to make sure we use those resources in the most efficient way. We wanted to more rigorously evaluate new projects that were coming in, question them more. Was there going to be value out of them? Were they defined in the right way? We certainly were very interested in increasing our global communication across functions, so that's both in terms of sharing information around the group companies and the technical and R&D people that are based around the world, but also using it to get better cross-functional working between R&D, business groups, commercial teams, and also the operations teams in the plants. And finally, we were looking for a system or a methodology that would help us improve our portfolio management. As I said previously, it was very easy to look at one project, but to be able to look at a whole range of projects within either a person or a team or a product group was actually quite difficult with the old system that we were using. So really, Roy looked around, and the decision was first taken was to actually implement a StageGate product development process methodology. That decision was taken. It was seen very much as an industry best practice, and that's something we were very keen to do, and you'll hear me talk about a lot, was actually rather than just take a system and completely redevelop it to what or to modify it to what we were already doing, we really wanted to try and bring some best practice into this change that we were making. As I've mentioned, we were very much looking at how do we manage a portfolio of projects, not just an individual project. How could a department manager look across his whole team and decide where was the best use of resource within a portfolio of projects? So going on from that, we obviously had chosen StageGate as the key methodology. And really then we looked for a software system to be able to automate it, to help us with this change that we were making, and to really form the base of what we do. And after a look at a number of systems, Roy chose Sophion Accolade for a number of different reasons. We felt it aligned very, very well with StageGate and the StageGate theory. Contained quite a lot of best practice that was important to us, to be able to look what other companies had done, to use best practice and try and bring that into our own process and into our own company. Accolade was also very good in that we could adapt the process models ourselves to cope with the different project types. I've already mentioned our R&D team will on a range of projects. It can go from very short-term technical service type requests all the way through to quite major research and development projects. So it's one of the things I'm going to explore in the next few slides on how we adapted the process models to fit the different project types from the team. And as I said, transparency of real-time data, allowing us to better assess and prioritize development projects. Where do we want to put resource? Which one would be the highest priority? And trying to really focus on getting the highest priority projects completed as quickly as possible out in the market, and then enjoying the margin that would come from the new products. So that decision was made, and in the second half of 2007, myself and another colleague worked very closely with the team from Sophion to design and configure the process and set up the initial process models. And we went live in January 2008 in Wollaston at the main headquarters. And then across the rest of that year, we rolled out to the other countries where group R&D people are situated. So just looking at how we configured the process, we basically have four process models that we use. First one is the main one for our projects, and that's what we call the MPD process, or the new product development process. Has a high level of justification. We're estimating time of greater than 10 days. That's total work time. That could be over several months. So it's quite a significant investment for us, and obviously it will create a new product in the end. However, that's for a lot of what we were doing and a lot of the work we do, that is probably quite a high level of justification, probably a little bit over the top. So we then looked at a lighter system, which we call a product modification request, PMR. It's a medium level of justification, less than 10-day work from the chemist, but it does create a new product. We then moved to a smaller one again, which is a technical service request. It's very much for our technical service teams, allowing them to record the work, low levels of justification. And then finally, we brought in a speculative technical workshop. So I'm going to now go through each of these process models and explain the rationale as to why we set them up and what we look for in each one. So for the first one, which is the MPD process, which, as I said, covers all major development projects. It includes any work where we're taking over 10 days of resource. So we're really looking at it as an investment, almost like a CapEx, where you're investing an amount of resource, amount of money, and there needs to be some return at the end. We really look for full business approval here, full justification. We use a series of deliverables, and those deliverables are filled in by different people, not just by R&D personnel. So we're really, again, trying to emphasize the cross-functional nature of StageGate and Accolade and what it can do. So as you can see there at the slide, we have a 6-stage process, going from a concept stage, going through a business case, into the actual main development. Scale up, obviously very critical for us, and that's a very critical gate there, gate number 3, on moving from development into scale up and up onto the plant. So typically for us, that's taking things from maybe a 1 to 5 kilo batch in the labs to maybe up to a 20-25 ton batch on the plant. So it's quite a critical stage for us to be able to manage. And then we go into market launch, and then into what we call tracking. And tracking is really used just to keep the jobs open and allow us to do some metrics further down the line. Just looking at the MPD process and the sorts of deliverables we use, just going down, the project ID really puts a set of metrics onto the project, and certainly further down the line allows us to cut and dice projects and information. So it just puts an ID and a set of metrics onto it. Definition is obviously what is required, and that's one we try and spend as much work on, but there's still some challenges that come from that. Technical assessment assesses things like IP, what's the risk technically. We try and look at whether production and supply, RM supply, are okay up front. We try and do that as soon as we can. Financial analysis, for us it's filled in by the business group, but it's about the returns and the returns that we expect. Gate scorecard and gate presentation are obviously used in certain ways around gate meetings to make decisions. And there's a couple in there on scale-up and technical work, which are things we added ourselves. They don't appear at every stage, but in the appropriate stage, we use deliverables. Firstly, in the development phase and the scale-up, we use a technical work deliverable. This enables us to break projects down into tasks. So we use the functionality of Accolade to break project down. It helps with maybe more junior members of the team being able to plan their work, or if projects need to be broken down into cross-functional groups, then we still providing a defined scale-up specifications, but for getting right first time, we felt at the time we needed a more defined procedure, even for a modification. So that's what we look at from a PMR, but a relatively small job. But as you can see from the process, it hasn't actually changed too much. We've changed some of the deliverables. There's fewer. We've combined some, but we still use the financial the same, the scorecard the same, the project ID the same. So we can really prioritize between MPD and PMRs. We can move the work. From a sort of resource point of view, we generally see them as very similar projects, but they need to be prioritized accordingly. So we try and use some of the same documents, but we then combine other documents to make a much lighter process. Just quickly covering the other two, a TSR, which is a technical service request for us. It's around a performance of a product. It can't lead to a new product. We have a migration ability, so we can migrate a request to another if you start needing a TSR and in the end you find out you actually will need a new project. Very small level of justification. I think it's probably fair to say that StageGate for this type of work is probably overcomplicated. We actually started with a 2-stage 1-gate process, but as you can see at the bottom, we now basically just have a 1-stage. So we use it to record information, link data in, which can be searched at a later stage. or if we're starting it as a TSR and then need to migrate, obviously we can take documents. The system will allow us to take documents with us. So that's a lot about business and the requests that come in from the business groups, but obviously as an R&D group we're continually seeking ways to innovate, and quite often the best way of doing that is to allow the chemists to play, in inverted commas, and to give them some time to check out their ideas or ideas that have come out. So we created speculative technical work. So this is really, I guess, where we're trying to manage what's sometimes known as the fuzzy front end. We have a fairly basic system. We monitor it quite closely. Senior managers monitor it. We regularly review it. It can't be scaled up, but it's really I guess a first step from an ideas management process. We also use it to manage some of our external research projects, but as you can see, basically a request comes in, a piece of work is done, that's managed, and then we've put a gate at the end, because always at the end there's a decision whether you will kill it or whether actually you will migrate it to a project which will then need fuller justification. So that's really the process models that we've set up, and we ended with 4. So what has implementing StageGate and Sophie on Accolade actually done for us? I think the first thing I'd like to look at is how I think it's improved our decision making. And there's a couple of different areas where I think this has helped. When we're actually sitting down and reviewing projects, the charts and reports function allow us to develop summary tables to really slice and dice the information. I mentioned the ID form. That puts tabs a lot of metrics onto a particular project, and it then means we can pick up on those at a later date. So we're really using Accolade as a tool to pick up all our portfolio of projects. I think also with a better definition of a project and what StageGate is forcing there, and with more information readily available around the project, then we can make more informed decisions about which projects continue, which ones need to be accelerated, which ones do we actually decide actually there's no longer a need for that, or that can't be justified, and so we need to kill the project. So we really work on probably 3 levels of project review. Obviously, within individual projects, there's certain gate meetings, certain reviews that need to happen. We're particularly tight around our scale-up gates, as I've mentioned. There's also the next level is around portfolio reviews. We use our product managers here as the key bridge, I guess, between R&D and our commercial teams. So the product manager can have reviews with the R&D department managers about their product groups. You have real-time information. They have a lot of information about the definition, what is wanted, and that can be reviewed. And then also we use a higher level chart and report about 2 or 3 times a year at a much higher executive type level to check we're using our priorities and our resources in the right way, and it's roughly following what the priorities are from the business. And then where we look at it, obviously priority, and I've talked about that quite a lot. Typically at the minute we're managing about 150 projects in the MPD and PMR. I think there's always a challenge as to whether that's too many or have we got to cut down, so we continue to try to look at that, but that's what we're currently dealing with at the minute. We prioritize on a financial justification and what is the value of the project to Barda. We use a 7-year MPV trying to look at margin prediction. And really we categorize into 3. There's priority 1, which is really for the chemists, it's drop everything. We try not to resource constrain it. It really is the top few projects, and we're very keen that it is only the top few. I think often you can get into a situation where everyone puts high priority on every job request, and then it's very difficult to prioritize. But we do it for a financial justification, and then 2 and 3, as you can see there, 2 being probably the main set of projects that we work on, and 3 we generally fit them in when we can, and 3 is often always ones that are questioned as to why we do or should we do. So we look very much at priority projects and what's the overall value, but we're flexible enough that we appreciate that some urgent jobs come in, might have a more of a strategic importance, and so we try and fit those in around the higher level priorities. But we're using this system and using StageGate and Accolade, we can ensure an individual's work is aligned with the overall business priorities. So we can move people if there's a priority one that needs more resource, we might ask some of our team to move and just support that project if there's a piece of work that needs to be done on it at that particular time. Accolade and StageGate is very good, but often you get asked, well, what about in tough times? And the last 2 or 3 years has been quite tough globally with a recession. And we actually found having a StageGate process, which obviously was in during that time, really gave us a real benefit. The real-time data and the decisions that we made during this time, it really helped us to focus, and Roy came up with the 5 Fs at the time, which is focus, focus, focus on fewer projects for faster delivery. And really we're looking at trying to only start new ones when projects have been delivered to the business. So we're working very much on a concept of trying to work on a few projects, make sure they get delivered, rather than trying to work on many projects and just inching them forward. And I think this was just emphasized during the recessionary period, where we were really trying to get products out very quickly to try and improve and get margin. So we work very closely with the business, we use the real-time information, we ring-fenced a few key projects, I think there was a top 8 or top 10, and really drove everything to get those out, very much looking at shorter term margin and shorter term value rather than a longer term view of margin. Now obviously we've moved a little away from that now, but it's quite interesting to see that some of the learning we use there are now being used as standard practice, and certainly the focus and trying to get things finished before we take on new is something we are doing, and I think it's making us more efficient as an R&D department. So I've just got a poll question to look at this stage in the presentation, and really we're looking at how people use an MPD type system to manage ideas. So we're just interested in your feedback on how you actually manage ideas. I'm going to touch on it in the next few slides, but that's the next question we're quite interested in. As I said previously, we'll feed the response back to you at a later point. Okay. So really now one of the things I want to touch on is that we put the system in 2008 is when we went live, but the process and the system that we're using has certainly evolved over that time, and this is one of the key points I wanted to make today, is we haven't put a system in and then just left it as it was in January 2008 and not changed anything. We've looked at how it's worked, and I just want to share some of the things that we've changed and some of the learnings that we've picked up. Very much during the design and configuration, when we started that in the middle of 2007, we originally suggested, I think it was 6 models we had, but as we started to design and think about what we really want, we reduced that to 4 with the idea management module on. So we went to basically the 4 models that I described to you earlier. We tried to keep it as simple as we possibly can. We still wanted to start with best practice. I've mentioned best practice models. So we took those and then we developed the 4 models that I mentioned earlier to basically fit them and best suit them with the different types of work that we did. But at that time, we very much used deliverables in particular from the best practice models. We didn't change too much on the deliverables. We wanted an approach to bring in best practice rather than totally redesigning our existing system. So that's what we did at that time. And then since then, we've looked at various modifications to the system, and always it's a balance between changing the system, updating the system, but you obviously don't want to be doing that every month or so. So we have gone in, relooked at how things are working, getting feedback from users, where do we want to improve things still further. So a number of things in the MPD, we initially set off with a certain number of deliverables. We decided they probably need rewriting, so we rewrote several of them to ensure terminology was more relevant to the terminology that we use at Scott Barda. Then as a second modification, probably about a year after, we actually decided to remove many of the deliverables to stage 1 because we were finding in practice gate 1 was almost redundant. It was almost jobs were going on and then a business case was being produced. So if you remember, it was concept to business case. So concept now really is just to get the job visible on the system. And at that point also we rewrote and combined 1 or 2 of the deliverables to reduce the total number down to the list that I gave you earlier in the table. PMR was the big challenge. We decided in the end to remove one of the stages. We've rewritten the justification deliverables, and actually in the end we found we'd actually maybe made it a little bit too simple and we weren't getting enough definition on a modification product, which can actually cause us almost more problems than the main project when we go into plant if the definition is wrong. Because you're basing a justification on a very small piece of work. So if the definition is wrong, that percentage-wise can take up much more time. So we had to tighten back up again a little bit. And as I've mentioned, the TSR we changed to very, very simple, but STW remains the same model as we did during the design phase. Turned down many requests. I think every user has their own idea of how the system needs to be used, so we have turned down quite a lot, but we have tried to take the feedback on board. We've continually looked at the concept of maintaining best practice principles where we can. We want to use StageGate to drive good project management. But again, we have allowed a degree of flexibility. We do allow projects to start without deliverables, and one of my questions is, does that help us or does that actually hinder us? It makes it look as a very flexible as an R&D team, but actually do we offer too much flexibility? So it's something for the future that we wanted to grow. Moving from quite a basic system to a StageGate, a full StageGate, was a real cultural change, and that was one of the things that we had to work on at the time. Selling the concept of 2 weeks work early on and then 6 months fixing at the back end, which there are numerous examples, and I'm sure a lot of you could relate a lot to that one. We've worked very much on upfront project definition because the culture is that by putting more work in upfront, it appeared to slow it down, that too much was needed upfront. You couldn't just get on and start in the lab. So we were working and are working still very much on that concept of trying to do a little bit more upfront to save us time in the end, and actually in the end the product will be delivered to market quicker. We had a little bit on charts and reports. It was different information from systems that people were normally using. We worked very much on that, adapting, modifying, and I'm glad to say that most project reviews in R&D now use Accolade and the charts and reports that come from Accolade in live meetings. So that's good. The culture of challenging and questioning and putting more rigor, more justification. We were still very much saying yes to every request. Not enough no's or yes buts, maybe not at the time. So we've had to work a lot on that. Using StageGate at our global sites where typically the types of projects are the smaller type, not as much, not as large projects done there, more done back at HQ. And also where the structure of global sites is slightly different. I mentioned earlier we rely very heavily on product managers here. They're not always in place at the global site, so that creates its own challenges and was something we had to work on and are still working on to overcome and to improve. And then training people on the StageGate principles, that was a big challenge for us, not just to train on putting in a software, but what are the principles behind what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. And that's something we've learned from the initial training and start, and we've improved and modified further. But looking at how have we done, I think if I go back to Roy's original brief, I guess, and the 5 things, certainly our KPIs are moving up. I think they are moving up. It's a little bit difficult to judge. Our measurement wasn't as good, and metrics is something we continue to look at. But certainly I'm comfortable with where the percentage margin is in the sort of mid to late 20s for anything, and that's any products developed. So we look at anything that goes new. So that includes modifications as well as major new products. I think we've reduced our time to market with more robust and better scaled up products. We certainly have the ability to move resource around, and we can make key decisions. We can make sure we're using our resources in the right areas. We're asking more questions. We're asking more questions about getting the right definition. Global and cross-functional, I think the communications between the R&D team, the commercial teams, and the operations are probably better than they've ever been in my career here. And I think the use of StageGate has certainly helped that. And our global sites can see all our activities as well. And certainly as a manager and having been a senior department manager and now the group R&D manager, certainly there is more visibility of the portfolio to allow a better decision making. So I think we're doing quite well, but we don't rest on our laurels. We continue to seek improvement. We continue to allow the process to evolve. We've undertaken at the start of this year a major new training in R&D project management, where StageGate and Accolade are the key tools. So we're currently running training sessions with the aim at Wollaston headquarters to relaunch. These are sessions that have been designed and run by a team, so it's not just from the senior management team, but the team has gone out, seen what other companies have done, and brought it back in and just trying to modify and train others into the principles of StageGate and why it's important to do certain things, and in the end that will be a benefit to the company. We're looking very much at improving our selection of projects. Gates with teeth, I think, is a phrase that has been used. Focusing on fewer, so again coming back to what we did during the harder times and making that standard practice, and improving the project definition. What is clearly is the definition and an understanding from all up front on what is required, and ensure that that is regularly reviewed. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, customers regularly change their mind, or markets move, or things change, and we just want to make sure that that definition is regularly being reviewed so we end up with the right project. And then putting some pressure on the commercial teams and ensuring that new products are commercialized in line with the original justification. So these are the things we're now aiming to try and push forward to look at continuous improvement in those areas. And still further in our plans, obviously once we've completed this work at the Wollaston HQ, we're looking to improve globally, increase the use of the principles at the global sites, and certainly the use of metrics. I've talked quite a lot, but quite a lot at the minute for us is sort of a feeling. We now want to see how is time really being spent, how can we get the actual versus the predicted in terms of cost and margin, how efficient is the process, and that's something I'm quite interested in getting other ideas and other discussions from other people. So my email's at the bottom of this slide, so if anyone wants a discussion or has some things to add there, then I'd be very interested in talking or hearing from you. And in the same way, the idea management, we asked you earlier about idea management. For us, it's very much a cultural change. We're trying at the minute to integrate it into the StageGate process. You know, it's a question for us, do we permanently run or do we manage it by sort of promotions? So that's another area where we're trying to seek improvement and evolve the process, the whole of the innovation process, still further at the company. So really, just to wrap up, I think implementing StageGate and the use of Accolade as the software tool has helped us to quickly adapt to market conditions. We have real-time information. We can make quite quick decisions. We can move things around our development portfolio. I think our collaboration between both global teams but also cross-functionally with the business, with the operations team, is far greater than it's been. We're all evaluating the same project data. And I think our portfolio is better balanced. We can question it more. We have the data available. We've got key stage and gate decisions we can make, and that's both for the short and the long term. I think very much from the beginning we always felt this would be a journey. I've put 5 years there. Is it 5? Is it 10 years? You know, we knew it would be a journey. I think we're probably about halfway through that journey. I think there's still a lot for us to do, a lot for us where we can improve. But I think we've also come a very long way from where we were at the beginning of 2007 using our homegrown system, our processes, and our efficiency within R&D is far greater than it was at that point. Had to be willing to flexible, to adapt, to allow the process to evolve, but always in the back of our mind we continue to look at the principles of best practice and try to make sure. So really to conclude, implementing StageGate in the real world really is an evolutionary process. We've been on a journey. It will continue to evolve, and hopefully we will see benefits from that. So thank you for your time. And I think we now move to the Q&A session.
Mark, thank you very much. That was excellent presentation and very instructive and educational for the audience. I think that's evidenced by the numbers of questions that we've received. So we'll try to go through as many as we have time for.
Okay.
So let me start with the first question. Is a audience member that would like to hear more about some of the cultural challenges you discussed briefly. What were the biggest cultural challenges you faced in implementing these new processes, and how did you attempt to address those?
I think if you look at the slide that I put up on culture, you know, one of the biggest challenges for us was implementation of StageGate and Accolade at our global sites, just by the nature of us, one, not being on site, not having the people who were trained fully. We had to do training a little bit more remotely at times. We tried to overcome it by doing site visits for initial training, but probably a key learning now was probably you really have to spend some time on the site and working with people, so be prepared to travel and to sit on the site, because it's very easy to do a software training, walk away, and then people are just left trying to use the system. So I think the sort of, you know, by its nature, the global sites, that was challenged. They also have a tendency in our system to work on smaller projects, so perhaps seeing something like the MPD or the PMR system for them, where they're doing quite minor modification type projects, most major developments would come into the Wilson headquarters. That's a challenge, and that was something we did and we continue to work on with them to try and show them the benefits. And they also have smaller structures by their nature. So the main product management team, again, sit on this site. We see product managers as I said, a key bridge between the commercial and R&D teams, and that's not always readily available in some of the global sites. So they're having to work a little bit more directly with the sales teams who have other priorities. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have, and as I've said, we still want to try and improve things there. But pleased to say, a lot of the sites are working. They are seeing different. It's quite interesting to see they see different value from it. So they use it in slightly different ways. But as long as the principles are there, then that's fine by me. But certainly we get good visibility of what the sites are doing now.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Another question from the audience is about a bit about your organizational structure. The question is, do you have a full-time StageGate manager with global responsibilities, or do you have that divided into local managers for different regions?
The straight answer to the question is we don't have a global sort of StageGate manager. I guess ultimately in my role I have overall responsibility for it. We certainly use key people within the different sites. So in the Accolade role terms, we have process owners at the different sites who play that, but we don't have a global StageGate. During the setup phase, we did use someone to work quite a lot on StageGate and spend quite a bit of their time, as well as myself and another colleague, in the design phase. But then after that, as we went through 2008, one of the team members played an important part in helping the senior management team adapt, modify Accolade process and the StageGate process. So generally, ultimately, it's my responsibility. We're probably not a big enough group to be able to dedicate one whole person to it. I can see some real benefit to doing that, and it would probably allow us to evolve quicker. But we're not in that lucky position, I guess, at the minute.
Thank you. Here's another question, I think, building on some of the, you talked about some of the changes that you have made in your process, and the question is, how did you manage the risk of building too much complexity in your processes? And and it sounds like maybe you could elaborate a little bit about some of the evolution of that process.
Yeah.
Sounds like you removed some of the complexity.
Yeah, I think very much when we started, we didn't want to put a system in where we took a best practice system and then basically we changed it to what we already had. So very much we went with best practice. We made some quite quick decisions during the design phase. Like, we've tried to keep the majority of the deliverables the same across all stages, so simply you're reviewing the same deliverable and just checking that's up to date, rather than having a different deliverable between business case and scale up. So the only two we've brought in are the technical and scale up work is how we manage it. Generally, we've probably reduced the complexity as the process evolved. We've merged deliverables together. We've taken one or two stages out, as you saw within the process. So generally, we've probably started with a more complex system, and generally over time it's evolving to a simpler system, but one that still adheres to the principles. And I think that's the balance you need to get. If you make it too simple, you will miss out on some of the principles of StageGate. So we have been quite firm in some cases. The key one is probably the product modification request. That's one of the key ones where we've had significant challenge as to whether that is overly complex. But we have some real goals as to why we want that in. We want the product management to be controlling their range and the ability to control the range. We don't want sales teams directly into R&D, and then the product managers, the first time they know about it is when it's being made on the plant. And we want to manage the scale-up process in those types of requests, because, as I said, even a minor modification can cause a lot of problems on the plant if the scale-up is not managed in the right way. we've been quite firm, but the PMR, the product modification, is probably the one where we've had most challenge, and that's the one we've worked on. But generally on across all of them, we've generally reduced the complexity of each from where we started.
Great. There's a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you together, because I think they're getting at the same area. One person wants to know about a little bit more about the role that senior management plays in participating in the StageGate process. And there's another question similar that asks about what are the methodologies you use to screen projects, who is involved with the screening, and what's a typical time frame to evaluate at each stage. So I imagine that crosses over a little bit with the involvement of senior management. So maybe if you could just comment on those questions.
Yeah, I mean, I say very much within the review, I guess the key people in terms of the acceptance of the project are my department managers, who work very closely with the business, or the product managers. So they're the key ones in terms of starting to set projects up. So they're my senior team have a real key part to play. So at that level of seniority, that's how we get projects on. That's generally how they start. They don't generally go up higher than that to be able to come to the system. So we give the decision-making ability there to that level. To go senior in terms of reviewing the exec reviews, basically it's myself with the business directors. So basically one below the managing director here, we will get involved on 2 or 3 times a year looking at how the portfolio is for that particular business director's business. Have we got things in the right way? Are we accelerating enough? Should we be killing some things? What's important? Have we got the right resources in the right place? So I guess in terms of answering the question, it's my next level down. In terms of my department managers, they're the ones who make the decisions and work with the business on what comes on. Have we got the right definition? But then there's sort of an overall review, just really, I guess, checking the system and checking the resource allocation.
Great. I think we have time for just one more question, and I think this one actually looks like it might be a good way to wrap up. The question is about asking for any recommendations you have about best practices for others that might be implementing an automated approach to StageGate in the future. What would you recommend? Any best practice in terms of implementing those?
I think one thing definitely which sort of have learned over time is it's not just about a software system. I think it's quite easy to, I've got a software system, I just put the software in, we change, and then the whole culture will change behind it. So, you know, from my experience, one best practice, which as I've said, we're implementing at the minute in a way with an additional training, is about very much looking at it alongside project management. The two go together. What are the principles of StageGate? What are the principles of R&D project management? And then the software tool is there to support that. So for actual implementation, the best practice for me is to make sure you get both, not just the software tool, but you also get the principles behind project management and what you're trying to achieve. And I think trying to look at your business and your business needs and try and get a system which is adaptable. It brings in some of those, you can bring in some of the principles that you want, but don't make it overly complicated that nobody's going to be using it. One of the reasons we've made our system slightly simpler is we would prefer to have high quality, fewer deliverables with the right information, having more deliverables that basically aren't filled in properly, or the information just isn't there simply because there's just too many of them. That's one of the reasons why we've moved to slightly simpler systems and we've combined deliverables. So just be careful on how many deliverables you're being asked and whether some could be combined. So basically, somebody is only filling out one document, not 5 documents. That would be a couple of tips from what we've done and how our process is involved.
Well, great. Thank you very much. And there are so many other questions that we've asked. Apologies to those that we couldn't get to today. That's all the time that we've got for Q&A. Mark, thank you again for your informative and very useful presentation. And a special thank you to our audience for participating in today's session. Good day and good evening.